Well, hello,
Hello.
Nate.
Hello, Greg. Hello, Internet. We are here for another edition of our bi-weekly bird identification live workshop here on the ABA's American Birding Association's various social media feeds. I'm Nate Swick. That's Greg Neise. We're here to talk about birds and birding and bird identification with you all lovely people watching online. You can find us on YouTube, which is the
Yep.
American Birding Association on YouTube and the American Birding Association on Facebook. I think I also shared it to the What's This Bird group on Facebook. I sort of neglected to do that the last few times that we've done this, which is sort of the reason why we started doing this in the first place. So my
Yep.
fault there. Hopefully y'all are enjoying it now. But we're excited to talk to you about birds and birding, a little bit about this program. Before we get started, Greg, I'm on a roll. You gotta let me run. Um,
Go.
the ABA hosts a number of groups on Facebook, communities on Facebook, one of which is called What's This Bird? It is a friendly place for people to share their bird photos, share their bird discoveries that they would like identified, and then our friendly group of admins and members will help them identify those birds for them. Every once in a while, at different times of year, we get some birds that require a little more thought, a little more discussion, or at least that a little more discussion might be more useful. And that's where Greg and I come in every couple weeks, uh,
Or
mostly
Mer-
to talk about to talk about some of these birds. Greg, how are you? It is hot. It is Independence Day week for both of our ABA
Yep.
area member nations. Happy Independence
Yep.
Day to all of you out there, regardless of whether you are on either side of the U.S. Canada border. We're going to talk birds anyway. It's a slow period for birds. It is hot. It is muggy. It is buggy. It is baby birdie. We've
It
got
is
some of those to
the
talk about.
time of baby birds. Exactly.
Baby bird time is we're getting close to bald cardinal period too. So bald
Always,
cardinal
always
pepper.
always an exciting month. Bald Cardinal month is always exciting in the bird groups.
That's right. We get a lot of that. We
And if
might
we
see some
ever,
of that next time.
I mean, I think if we ever get a bald yellow cardinal, the world will
Oh
end.
my God, the internet's gonna explode.
Yeah.
That'd
Yeah.
be it. We'd say goodbye. We're done. Later.
So we got some
Our work is
folks
finished.
watching. We got some folks watching on Facebook. Hi to Mia, Dennis, and
Hey
Christopher.
Mia, good to see you
Um,
again.
and so
Our
part
friend
of
Chris
part of what
Ortega, NAL1212. I don't know the name, but that's the handle on YouTube. Hello, everybody out there. We've got a good group of folks here to watch us
yeah,
muddle through some bird identification
well,
here
a
this
lot of
afternoon.
people unlike us have the day off. Um,
It's true. Maybe that's true.
um,
Maybe
part
that's
of
why
what
we
we
have
do
fewer people
here
than we usually do.
that too. Part of what we do here is we're watching the comments live on Facebook and
Hmm.
YouTube. So if you guys got something you want to say, you got a question, um, didn't understand a point, whatever it is, throw it up in the comments. We're watching and we will try to get to it.
Rachel Berner suggests a bald yellow intersex cardinal, a gynandromorphic cardinal. That would be
Yeah,
pretty cool. How would you be able to tell though? Because if it was yellow, and the difference between the gynandromorphs are pretty much right down the middle, and so when
right.
there's a male and a female normal, it's bright red and kind of yellowishy brown. If for yellow, it'd be a little more difficult to tell, but it'd still be pretty cool. That would be cool. I'd like to see that. Let me get a photo of
Yeah,
it
and
when I've seen enough yellow
if it
cardinals.
was bald, yeah,
Check all the
that would be
boxes.
something. Um, sorry, I just got completely distracted by the idea of a bald yellow intersex cardinal.
Yeah.
Um, so you're all done with your breeding bird surveys?
I did. I did my last one last week in Western Virginia, well, southwestern Virginia, just across the border in North Carolina, up around Martinsburg. If folks know, it's pretty much the driver of my entire Henry County, Virginia county list. It was good. We had a number of birds. Had a Louisiana water thrush still singing in
Oh,
late June, which was cool. And
that's
I've always found some really interesting stuff on that breeding bird survey than I do here. It's about 500 to 700 feet higher in elevation than where I live, and so we get things like breeding American red starts, hooded warbler, a little more common.
yeah,
Lots of scarlet tanagers that I seem to that's like right the line. I live below the scarlet summer line, and my breeding bird survey is above the scarlet summer line, so they flip at some point
yeah.
in that elevation, which is kind of neat to see.
Cool.
or to witness.
Yeah. I'm looking here on Facebook. Jim Markham asks, are limpkins showing up in the north like last year? And
No,
they're not.
they're not. Unless we
That's
have gotten so over them that people are just not reporting them anymore. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that's the case. And this is one of the most interesting phenomenon that I've witnessed in all my years of doing this. The limpkin explosion that just got destroyed in one winter and doesn't seem to be coming back.
They've had enough. They're going to stay around the Gulf Coast now, and they've made their inroads to the Western Gulf, and they are not interested in it going beyond it. Apparently, yeah.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
So, what do you say we dive into some birds here?
I think we've got one more thing.
We do.
Susan Nelson says she lives in Southwest Tennessee, but picking up the song of a Baltimore Oriole, which is
I see it
rare here. Yeah, I mean Baltimore Oriole, at least where I live, which is sort of below Baltimore Oriole breeding elevation. They are present, but they're very local. So you might be lucky enough to have a spot where there's, a big old oak tree that they like to, and some open pasture land. That seems to be what they like, at least where I live. And when you get up in the higher elevations, up in the southern Appalachians, that you start picking them up a little bit more in the river areas. But
around here, they like cottonwoods.
Cottonwoods, yeah, cottonwoods.
Yeah, those big, giant, tall cottonwoods are up in the way up in the top of the cottonwoods.
So I would say that you're probably getting one. They're very scattered and local, in places where they're farther south of where they're supposed to be. So southwestern Tennessee doesn't strike me as too far out of range that would be completely impossible for a Baltimore Oriole to turn out.
Yeah,
we used to get them in Southwest Missouri where I grew up.
So, before we get into birds, I would like to remind everyone that we are at the very tail end of our summer fundraiser, the Nesting Season Appeal, which ends tomorrow, and we have a very generous donation that will match other donations 1-to-1 up to $20,000. And that runs out tomorrow. So if you guys out there like what we do, you like this program, you like the podcast, you enjoy the other content we do, please hit that URL there on the screen and give today, because it will be matched, and
we'll go twice as far.
We'll go twice as far, exactly.
So if you have been hesitating on donating to the ABA, now is a perfect time to do so.
Absolutely.
Andrew Kambauer says, still waiting for DC to get its limpkin. That's a
wow. DC doesn't have a limpkin. That's crazy.
I mean, DC is odd because it's so tiny.
No, I get it.
Weird holes in its list. Yeah,
I get it, but still, it just. Well, yeah.
It is a swamp, as they say. So
yeah. Well,
they would get one by now.
There's lots of snails to be eaten.
Among other things.
This first one comes to us from Thomasville, Georgia.
Rural pasture. Yes, Suzanne. Sorry, here we are getting distracted.
That's
Suzanne
okay.
says,
We got plenty of time. We got plenty of time.
That sounds like a place where you might expect a Baltimore Oriole, at least to me.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, what do we got here? Perching bird. Perching on a wire.
What do we have here?
Bird on a wire.
In the southeast.
Yep, Thomasville. Yeah.
So, the first thing, other than the size, because we can see this just looks like a standard power line that would connect electricity to your house or cable line, but the way it's strung up on a cable there, we can get a good idea of how big this bird is, because we've all seen these cables.
Sort of smaller than a robin, larger than a sparrow.
Yeah.
That's the sort of gist I get here.
And the first thing that I see on this bird is the bill. I mean, it's just
a big old bill.
It's just a standard old bird shape on the wire. But the bill is interesting and unique and fat and thick and all of those things. So Where does that
Yeah,
take us?
I'm also interested in the just kind of all over kind of yellowish green of this bird. Not much going
Yeah.
on, not much in the way of wing bars, no apparent wing bars, not much going on the head. Looks like it's we're getting towards the end of the summer, the midsummer, where birds start looking a little ratty. We're coming up on their feathers being the most worn of the year because they will replace a lot of those body feathers in their fall molt. So this bird
Mm-hmm.
is looking like it is very much ready to molt with all those kind of nappy looking feathers around the head and on the body.
Yeah.
But yeah, the and this is a weird thing to say because in the last few years, this group of birds has been sort of taxonomically homeless
Yeah.
until they finally figured out exactly what we're dealing with. But this is a tanager bill. It's what it says to me. And tanager is a taxonomic group that is not really very useful. It's sort of a group that is a longish, thickish bill. Tanagers, birds called tanagers, are found all throughout the Americas, but they are not all very closely related. Tanager is one of those words like sparrow and warbler
Yeah.
and
Warbler.
bunting that don't have any sort of taxonomic weight. But this is a tanager bill, and in Thomasville, Virginia, there are probably two tanagers that you have to consider. One certainly more common than the other, but they both would
Absolutely.
need to be considered this time of year, and that would be summer tanager and scarlet tanager.
So let's take a look at those two. And
Yeah,
you
you got
can
you got the
see
names on there, so we're not even.
I do. I do. Our bird is a summer tanager. And we're comparing it here with a scarlet. And, when I saw this bird, the first thing that jumped out to me was the size of the bill and how lanky and long it looks overall.
Yeah.
And, those scarlet tanager it's a smaller, more compact
compact.
bird. It's got a
Yep.
shorter bill.
Rounder
you-
head. It's kind of cuter and more plush looking almost.
Exactly. And it's also got black wings in almost every plumage.
Yeah. Sometimes they
And
can be sort of faded, but for the most part, they're going to be darker than the
exactly.
body.
It can be hard to see, but they're usually, like you said, they're usually darker than the body. And one nice thing about tanagers, especially in the summer, not, I was going to say summer tanagers, but what I meant to say is
summer.
tanagers in the summer, is that they don't sing, but they call a lot. They're chatty. And scarlet and summer tanagers have very different calls. Summer tanager,
Yeah.
I think of one of the most
The
iconic
songs can be quite
noises.
similar, but the
songs can be
calls
quite similar.
are definitely what's giving it away. Yeah.
The calls are definitely different, and that chicky tucky tuck of the summer tanager, I think of that as one of the most iconic sounds of the South. It's just as
Yeah,
you're
we
driving
get a lot of
country roads, you're going along, you just hear that like every quarter mile when you're in the right habitat.
Yeah, and they tend to like kind of second growth habitat, kind of brushy stuff, lower trees. They'll be in those sort of deciduous areas, but they definitely like a more kind of open habitat more generally than scarlet tanager, which where I live, which is, as I said when I was talking about my breeding bird survey route, like on the summer side of the scarlet summer line, although they're both kind of, they bleed across that line a fair bit. We do have scarlet tanagers around here, and I do pick them up in ones and twos in various places, but they're almost always in kind of oak woodlots. Like they love oak woodlots. And whether or not that's the case as you go further north, I do think they're probably more, generalized in their habitat preferences, but they do always like a big deciduous woodlot. And that's sort of the places you will expect to see them. Whereas the summer can be in kind of that brushy, scrubby, second growth stuff that abuts a lot of those sort of smaller trees, more brushy trees, cedars and pines and things of that nature. That's where I usually see them. That's not going to be the case across the entirety of their range.
Yeah.
But for where I am, that's sort of where I look for, and which is probably not all that different from Thomasville, Virginia, honestly, or Thomasville, Georgia. That's sort of what I'm looking for when I see those birds.
Yeah,
I do get the scarlet tanagers singing though this time of year. That's how I got them on my bird survey. But they almost always intersperse it with a little chipper. Chipper.
Yeah.
There's always one of those in the middle of the song.
Absolutely. And where we get them, same thing, but we we tend to get summer tanagers in the more open oak savanna habitat. And
Yeah.
scarlet tanager is more of a forest bird. I think of scarlet tanager and wood thrush sort of being two
Yes, I agree with you.
species that are in the same habitat, whereas
Yep.
summer tanager, more like
Eastern towhee, brown thrasher,
eastern towhee, brown
stuff
thrasher,
like that.
eastern
Yeah.
whippoorwill, exactly.
Mhm.
Often sandy soils.
Yes, exactly.
They like that stuff. Kathleen Ward asks on Facebook, do white egrets kill one another? The reason I ask is I saw two almost fighting to the death. One had the other pinned underwater, but it finally got away. I'm unable to post pics. Well, I mean, the short answer to that is,
probably.
birds are metal, and they will.
And dinosaurs.
They will mess you up if they
Herons
don't
and
like
egrets in
you.
particular.
And herons and egrets are just dinosaurs. So birds do fight and birds do kill each other. And when you've got weaponry like a heron or an egret with those bills, they use them. I will never forget. I came within fractions of a second and inch to losing an eye once to an American bittern that had hit a power line where we were on a bird walk, and a bittern had hit the power line and was in the marsh with a broken wing. And 12-year-old Greg goes sloshing out in the water to get it.
I'm gonna help this bird.
And that bittern came right for my eye and like hit me in the forehead, and it just
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why
they
rehabbers
are.
who work with those things wear goggles.
Exactly. You got it. They are bad.
David Beecher over here
Badass.
on YouTube has an observation here that I think is worth talking about briefly. He says, shouldn't summer have a paler bill? And I would say yes, but there's clearly some lighting stuff going. Well, a couple things. There's some lighting stuff going on in this photo. It's very dark. It's backlit quite a bit, and so everything's going to look a lot darker than it actually would be if we were in good light. And two, I mean, do you have any observation? They do have kind of a darker greenish bill that can be kind of tending towards olive sometimes. But I think what we're dealing with here is mostly the lighting situation.
I agree. The backlighting is doing a lot here to make that bill look dark. It's making the undersides of the tail look almost as dark as the scarlet next to it.
Yeah.
That's in better
Those
lighting.
would be mostly the same color as the wings and the body.
Exactly. And the bill color this time of year, it's kind of like the plumage. It can be all over the board. I've seen some with fairly dark bills. But I think that if this bird was in better lighting, the color of the bill would be more horn colored. It usually shows a little bit of like an almost yellowish orange blush to it. That's not. Yeah. And I'm talking about
especially an adult male. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Adult male. That's not what we're talking about here.
No,
but I'm talking, when it looks like this, a green nondescript summer tanager, even so, the females, they'll show, but as we've said so many times, bare parts coloration is dependent on hormones, and it's dependent on, even diet and stress. There's a lot of things that can affect the color of bills and feet and facial skin on birds. So that's where structure, when you get a situation like this, you look at the overall structure of these two birds. The summer has the bigger bill. It's longer, it's lankier, it's got a longer tail. The scarlet tanager, as Nate said, is shorter and stockier and cuter. How's the soccer game going back there, Nate?
Spain scored in the time. Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to point out with regards to tanager taxonomy, I kind of glossed over that earlier when we started talking about this bird, how tanagers are found throughout the Americas, but they aren't always related to each other. And also a lot of other birds we have discovered as we've gotten a little bit better about dealing with bird genetics that we did not think were tanagers, turns out to actually be real tanagers. And by that I mean Thraupidi, the family of birds that reaches its highest diversity in South America. But these tanagers, which sort of superficially look like those tanagers, which are sort of compactish body, kind of do it all sort of bill, are actually most closely related to northern cardinal Paraloxia,
Mm-hmm.
They're they're cardinalids now, as we know, which
Yep.
makes sense. Their songs are actually sort of kind of rich in a way that cardinals are, which is different than a lot of tanagers in the tropics. And the very different um, colors between the male and the female, the sexual dimorphism is
Right.
very much pronounced as they are in cardinalids, other cardinalids. So yeah, not really tanager. It turns out we don't really have any native tanagers in the ABA area anymore, or do we? I think
Oh
Morlet's
yeah, we
seed
got
eater, which we
Morlet
always
seed
thought was
eater,
as a banana quit is a
and
tanager,
banana
a real
quit. Yeah.
tanager. And there might be a couple others. A blue-gray tanager, which I think has shown up in the ABA area before in the past. But those are all the real tanagers, and they're not
Right.
our, Scarlet Summer Western hepatic
Exactly.
group foursome of breeding ABA area tanagers in quotes.
So, question on Facebook: I bought a bag of dried mealworms. Do the birds like it, or do they prefer to have the real deal? Well, I would say that dried mealworms are the real deal,
Yeah,
and
I mean
in
they'll
my
always prefer
experience,
them
birds love them.
live and wriggling, as Gollum
Yeah.
says in Lord of the Rings. But the dried stuff is pretty good too. They'll go
Yeah,
out for that.
birds love
You'll
them
get
in winter.
bluebirds like them. Yeah, tanagers will come to
Yeah, and
feeders.
freeze dried insects. Yeah, birds really do love them. I always reminded of that. I think it was a Siberian accenter that wintered in the neighborhood around one of the Alaskan cities. It wasn't Anchorage. It was further north.
Fairbanks,
It may have been Fairbanks,
Utqiagvik,
but
Nome.
it wasn't that far north. They had trees and big houses and stuff.
Fairbanks maybe. Yeah.
And people had on their porches bug zappers for the mosquitoes. And the tray in the bottom of the bug zappers were always full of freeze-dried, desiccated insects. And
Yep.
this Siberian accenter spent the entire winter just picking freeze-dried bugs out of the bug zappers on people's porches.
I'm impressed they even
Yeah.
had bugs in the winter.
Birds
in
are
Alaska.
metal, that folks. They will find food anywhere, and they will kill
go.
whatever they have to kill to get it. Um, all right. Whoa, this is a good one.
This is another nondescript bird.
Yeah. Well, we
Florida,
could tell
so-
how we could tell how big this bird
Peninsula
is
Florida.
because it appears to be on one of
It's like a
the
sable palm.
on a palm frond, either that or a what's the little bushy palm called? I'm having a brain freeze here. The saw palmetto down in
yeah.
the south. But yeah, so this well, there's three things here happening that identify this bird quickly and easily. But this bird, as we said, looks like nothing. And it's just a little gray.
Lori
thing.
Conrad points out that the Siberian accenter was in Idaho.
Was that in Idaho? Okay.
what
That,
she
I mean,
says
that
on
sounds. Yeah. No, that
She was
and
there,
that may
so
be
that sounds right.
that may be right. I had Fairbanks stuck in my head, I think, but yeah, it may have been Idaho. Yeah. So this guy here is gray. It has sort of just an average bird bill. It's not big and thick for
A little bit slighter
eating
than
seeds.
this summer tanager we just saw, though the plumage does not look all that different, but it definitely has a different feel to the bird, with little thin spindly legs and a relatively sturdy but kind of sharp-ended and kind of uniformly shaped bill. So I definitely get warbler feel from this bird.
Yeah. And there's like I said, there's three things that we can see right here that give this bird away. And one is it's summertime in Apopka, northern Florida. So that's a big clue right there because there's only a small handful of little birds like this
a lot of breeding,
that
breeding warblers.
breed in Florida. Number two is at the base of the bill, we see a little yellow gape there, which tells us this is a juvenile bird. This
The young
bird
Yep.
hatched very recently and fledged very recently. And then number 3 is the markings on the under tail covert, or on the undersides of the tail feathers that we can see. And that gives it away as a warbler, as one of our wood warblers, because we really don't have any other small birds that have those black and white, boldly marked tail feathers like that. So with those 3 pieces of information, where do we go from there?
Well, I would start by probably figuring out what warblers are likely to breed in Apopka, Florida. I suspect that there are not that many.
I think there's common yellowthroat.
Common yellowthroat is certainly one. Maybe yellow-throated warbler. Is that too
Yellow-throated
far
warbler.
south for that?
Northern Parula.
Northern Parula and pine warbler.
And pine warbler. Those, I guess, and there might be some American redstarts around, but I think
that's awfully far south for that. But yeah,
but those 4 are the 4 we're
those
dealing
4 are the big
with.
ones. The long tail and kind of large bill rules out Northern Parula.
And maybe Swainson's warbler.
Maybe Swainson's, yeah, which also has sort of a large bill, but would not have such a long tail and would not have a lot of patterning on the tail. So I think we can rule that one out.
Right. Well, that's the tail pattern and shape rules out common yellowthroat and
yellowthroat. This is plain, yeah,
and Swainson's warbler,
and Parula,
and yeah. And the bill
Parula has
is
pattern in the tail, but it's much smaller tail. Yeah, the bill is
and the bill is smaller in Parula. Yellow-throated,
even in the Juve, you'd expect to see some pattern.
Exactly, it shows some of that pattern in juvenile plumage, and this is one of the most. We have like 2 or 3 most confusing birds on What's This Bird. And this is one of the 3 most confusing birds. And that is dun, 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 pine warbler.
Juve pine warbler. Yeah, very confusing bird. They can give you so many different looks, especially late summer into fall, from the kind of absolutely gorgeous kind of burnished gold adult males to these sort of young birds that look like almost nothing at all. But there are a few things that do stand out to pine warbler, and a lot of it is shape and just sort of impression. Pine warbler is a large-billed warbler, so it's gonna show a lot there, and they are kind of just plain in general, especially the young birds, young females. They're just, there's not a lot there, but you can see the tail pattern there, as Greg, as I'm sure, is going to point out. Tail pattern in warblers is always a great go-to when you're trying to figure out these sort of weird, plain, nothing birds.
Yeah, and so what we're looking at here is the bird in question on the left, which is a very fresh juvenile pine warbler. And there's an article in one of the fairly recent birding magazines about juvenile warblers called "This Is Where the Fun Begins." And we don't, most of us who don't live in northern Minnesota or Canada or the mountains where warblers, a lot of warblers breed, never see the juvenile plumage, because they molt out of that before they leave the area that they were born, and move into more a plumage like what we see on the bird in the right here, which has enough hints that you can get it. Okay, it's got some yellow, it's got the bold wing bars, it's got the undertail covert or undertail pattern.
Eye crescents.
It's got the eye crescents that are getting ready to form the characteristic spectacles of an adult pine warbler. So all the hints are there, and it's much easier to identify a few weeks later on, not even a few weeks, a week or 2, because they molt out of that plumage very quickly.
Very quickly, yep.
And
yeah, and I'll tell you, like, I did the ABA field guide to birds of the Carolinas a few years ago, and it was fun to try and pick the proper photos from Brian Small and others to put in that to illustrate the points, the identification points that you want to see in these birds. And pine warbler was the only bird in the entire book that got 4 different images, because because of my experience with what's this bird, like that is a bird that people confuse all the time. And also, sometimes the adult males, even people will think
Yeah.
that it's like a goldfinch or a prothonotary warbler, because I don't know that those birds are particularly well illustrated in a lot of field guides because they can be very, very bright. It's just a confusing
And
bird all around.
yellow-throated vireo.
Yeah, yellow-throated vireo.
That,
Yep.
people in the southeast in the winter reporting yellow-throated vireos,
Yeah.
like, no, they're not. Yellow-throated
Yeah,
vireos
right.
are all in South America. They're not in the
Yeah.
southeast in
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
January. Those are all
It's always
pine
a pine
warblers.
warbler, which in
Um,
sort of the gray and damp of a southeastern winter can very much stand out as a, this bright golden bird. It's striking.
we're gonna stay in the southeast, it appears. This is from
Yeah.
Fredericksburg,
Some
Virginia.
might call it the southeast.
And this is a common bird that we see a lot in the east. Out west,
Probably
there
the
are a
most
couple.
common bird on all my breeding bird surveys.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they are. I would say truly abundant around here. I mean, if you,
In the right
they're
places.
not necessarily
Yeah.
easy to see, but if you know what they sound like, boy, you will
Oh, you
hear
them
them.
all the time. Yeah.
And out east, we only have a few bluebirds, and we only have one really, well, two, that are just kind of blue all
Entirely
over. This isn't a blue jay. It's not an eastern bluebird. They have pattern and they have
Usually
rusty
white, yeah.
breasts. So yeah, this is a bunting, and in the east, it is an indigo bunting. And the person who posted this wasn't sure if it was an indigo bunting or the other blue bunting in the east, which is a blue grosbeak. And this is another one of those species pairs like summer and scarlet tanager where, yeah, they are similar, but when you really look at them, they're quite different.
But equally common in a lot of these habitats too.
And-
Once you key in
exactly.
on blue grosbeak's song, you will hear them everywhere.
Exactly, and yeah, once you learn that chink call of the blue grosbeak, yeah, again, you drive down a country road with the window open, you'll hear that
There's a lot of
chink
them.
as you go by all the time. So yeah, here is an indigo bunting, the bird in question on the left, and a blue grosbeak on the right, and even though they are quite similar, you can see that they're very different birds. First off,
Yeah.
the color blue is very different. The blue grosbeak has really kind of a unique what's the word I'm looking for? What kind of blue is this?
Indigo or kind
It's-
of it's not royal blue. It's like almost like a
No,
navy. It's like a
it-
deep purplish kind of blue.
And almost a hyacinth, like a hyacinth macaw, but
mhm,
not quite going. Whereas indigo bunting is it's more of an electric blue, and
Yeah, turquoisey.
when you see it in different light, it shifts, and it can be. I've seen some that look almost green when the
Yeah.
light
Well,
hits them just the right way.
blue, interestingly
Exactly.
enough, is a color that is not determined by pigments, but by the structure of the bird's feathers and how the light refracts off of it that makes us see blue. It's not a natural. There are some birds that for which the blue is naturally occurring, but not our blue grosbeak and indigo bunting. It's a feather structure that gives it that sort of rich color, almost glowing color. Sometimes
I don't know that there are any bird feathers that are actually blue
that are
pigment.
actually blue. Okay, well,
I don't think there are. It's all structure.
I thought
The
there
color
were some
blue
parrots
is.
that might be, but maybe not.
I don't believe that's true.
All right, there you go.
But the cool thing about the blue color in bird feathers is that birds, some species of birds, have evolved the ability to move the feathers and aim those colors in the way they want. So like hummingbird gorgets, when they flare those gorgets out, it's
Yeah.
the same structure that causes all the
Ultramarine. Ultramarine is the color. that Susan
ultramarine.
Hunter
That's
suggests.
there you go. That's
There actually
right.
is a bird, a very closely related, same genus, in the American tropics called ultramarine grosbeak that looks
Yeah.
almost identical to a blue grosbeak. So much so that when I was in Colombia last year, we were at a place that had an ultramarine grosbeak, and I saw one through the binoculars. Like, was like, wow, blue grosbeak. That's weird. I wouldn't have expected that down there. And then someone
Yeah.
told me later that it was actually an ultramarine grosbeak. They look almost identical. It's wild.
So,
Same little black mask, same everything.
starting from top to bottom, we see both of these birds have rather thick, chunky bills. They have black masks, little black masks, but really look at the shape of the bills. And the blue grosbeaks is just so much thicker and more, shorter and just heavier, especially the lower mandible and the indigo bunting has this curved culmen, and actually the lower mandible is kind of curved too. It just gives it a very different look.
It's dainty
to the face. Yes,
blue grosbeak. People sometimes confuse or like when they see an indigo bunting, they're like, "Oh, this bill looks awfully large. Is this a blue grosbeak?" But the truth is, when you get a good look at a blue grosbeak, like, oh, that bill is truly large.
It is.
You don't really need to be questioning yourself all too much when you see that blue grosbeak, and they really do have that gross beak.
Yep. And then the bird's overall structure, just like the two tanagers we were talking about, blue grosbeak tends to be a longer, lankier, slimmer bird. Indigo bunting is more compact, shorter tail. We get down to the tail. Huh?
Blue grosbeak, when you see it on a power line and you don't have any color, it actually sort of looks like a brown-headed cowbird.
It does.
Yeah.
It does, but the tail's a little bit longer, and it flips the tail around. So if you see it sitting up at the top of a little shrub, and it's just kind of chipping away there, they often flip their tail. But also in fresh plumage, note how the undertail coverts and the tail feathers themselves have white tips on them, and it's not. That white wears off pretty quickly, but if you get a nice crisp bird like this, you will see that white on the tail feathers, and that's a dead giveaway that it's a blue grosbeak, because indigo bunting never shows that.
No.
All right. Going a little further west now, Boone, Missouri. What do you got here?
Another little perching bird. Definitely gives me a certain vibe with that compact body, large head, and very long tail, along with the upright posture. I think I'm pretty confident in calling this thing a flycatcher. We've talked about flycatchers a bit in a few of our previous shows, so particularly things like willow flycatcher versus eastern wood pewee. This looks like to be another bird in that sort of vein. Greg, yellowy wash across the belly. I think this photo is a little oversaturated, so I think that might be a little more apparent than you might see in the field, but it's certainly there. All black bill. The bill almost looks kind of extremely thin, which is sort of noteworthy, but it is all black, and it does have wing bars, though. They're kind of beigey and brown, as opposed to sort of the paler wing bars you'd expect to see in a pewee or an impid.
Yeah. And last week, as Nate said, we talked about a couple of those species. And during the discussion, y'all in the comments brought up, well, what about Eastern Phoebe? So what about Eastern Phoebe? And so here is our bird,
Missouri,
which is an Eastern Phoebe. And you'll notice here in this comp that I've sort of adjusted the exposure a little bit and desaturated it so it's a little more accurate to what the bird actually looks like versus the oversaturated image we had before. But you'll notice right away, oh, what are you about? Come here. My dog is having a problem here. Lie down. Lie down. You'll notice that the Phoebe has really short wings and a long tail. And then when we move over to the Eastern wood pewee, in the middle there, it's got long wings and a long tail, and it's very kind of long, attenuated structure. And the willow flycatcher is on the right, is kind of in the middle. And It's shorter. It's got a shorter tail. It's got a stockier build. Um, but also look at the feet and legs. You know, in the willow flycatcher and the eastern phoebe, we can see the legs. They got strong legs. Eastern wood pewee, like we discussed last week, the feet almost appeared like to be missing.
Yeah.
You know, when they perch, it's like you don't see, they're ridiculous little feet. And that's always a good clue when looking at flycatchers like this. Is the peewees have little teeny feet. Come here and lie down.
Yeah, and the willow and the eastern wood pewee often they seem proportionally a bit more, I don't know, normal. The size of the head compared to the size of the body seems a little more well proportioned. Phoebes always seem to me like they have just absolutely enormous noggins, like just giant heads, like they're gonna tip over forwards. They just give a very different feel. That, along with the sort of shorter wings and the longer tail, does give a very different feel, very different vibe, gestalt, jizz, whatever you want to call it, to things like eastern wood pewee and willow flycatcher. Even when they are showing characteristics that we typically associate with pewee and willow flycatcher, like those wing bars. But the bill also, the all black bill.
The all black bill is a
stands
dead
out
giveaway
quite a bit
for
as well.
eastern phoebe. And the white throat and the way that the dark head and the white throat kind of contrast, and the dark bill, it gives it a very different look than the other two flycatchers that we're comparing it with here. So yeah, the bird in question is an eastern phoebe, and here we've got an eastern wood pewee and a willow flycatcher that we're comparing them with. This is a fun one that we get every summer around this time. And how's the score doing, Nate?
It's still 1-0. We had someone on Facebook post a photo of what he says is Townsend's warbler that might be a hybrid, and a McGillivray's warbler that has a full full eye ring, and I was just distracted by looking for those on the What's This Bird feed. But yes, this interesting bird here from Cincinnati, of course, Greg.
Yeah, this is a bird we see every summer. And like the young pine warbler, it is one of the most confusing birds because it's extremely common. You find it almost anywhere. And in this plumage, which is the juvenile plumage, people don't know what to do with it. So what are you seeing here, Nate?
Yeah, so things that kind of stand out to me is this all over sort of gray and streaky appearance. It's got a fairly sturdy bill. It's got what looks to be a black mask and a very, very, very short tail, and very sturdy, strong looking legs. I mean, I know what this bird is. The adult birds we're quite familiar with. European starling. These young birds always throw people off because they're quite different, at least in terms of plumage. But the structure of this bird still says starling to me. It's very kind of wide-bodied across the chest. It's got the short tail. It's got the big, sturdy, strong legs. If it started flying away, I would see that sort of triangular shape that starlings always have when they're flying. But yeah, there are it's a very unique look, even so, the sort of bandito mask and all that. But there are birds that sort of look similar that people can be confused by, Greg.
And
I'm
that is
trying to tee you up.
You did a wonderful job there. That is, there is one bird that in the same time of year right now we see in some places that is very similar, and it might not be the first thing that you think, but we see this all the time, and that is juvenile cedar waxwing and juvenile European starling. They look surprisingly similar. A lot of it has to do with the general shape. The starling and waxwing are kind of the same shape. Starling's a little bigger. But it's the little black mask around the eye, and the starlings when they're young have shorter bills than the adults, as you can see here, and these two can be surprisingly confusing when they're young.
One of the things that I'll point out on the cedar waxwing, though, always is that that tail pattern. This young bird does not
Yes.
have that nice, beautiful yellow-tipped terminal band that is so prevalent on the, among other things, on the
You could pick it out
striking
there just
cedar
a
waxwing.
little
But you
bit.
can see you can see it coming. You can see
Right.
to be yeah, it's the preview of coming events right there.
Yep. Okay, let us move on to California. And we've got a bird in looks like a slough or a pond.
Weird looking duck.
I am still having problems with the dog, so take this one away here for just a second, Nate.
Okay. Yeah, so what we've got here is a water bird that's sitting actually quite low in the water. Notably, you notice the neck is almost completely submerged there. But some things to stand out. The body does not appear to have much anything on it. That long swan-like neck that is black and white, leading to the sharply demarcated black and white head, and what appears to be a very long, maybe slightly upturned, long, sharp bill. This is not a duck, although we do have some ducks that have kind of longish necks and long, sharp-looking bills, like mergansers.
Mergansers.
It's not a loon because that neck is far too long for a loon, even though the body is very long. This is one of our Acmophorus grebes, which are in the western part of the continent, which are very uniquely shaped with long, dark bodies and those very long, the long swan-like neck that leads up to that black and white head. We have two of them. They didn't used to be two species. They were split sometime about 20 odd years ago. Seems like yesterday to me.
Yeah.
But that is Western grebe and Clark's grebe, and that is one of the more difficult identification conundrums on the continent, for my money. Very difficult because they can be, you can have the birds on the extremes that are very obvious, obviously one or the other, but then you've got a lot of these sort of intergrade, kind of in-betweeny birds, and also they hybridize from time to time, which does not help.
Yeah. And so the bird in question in the original back of camera photograph is a Western grebe, and we know that from the time of year, and how the black of the top of the head goes down below the eye and goes all the way to the gape of the bill. And on the Clark's grebe, it's got a white face.
Sorry.
It's got a white
Amazing.
face and white lores, and a much more well-defined cap, if you will. There are other subtle differences. Clark's grebe tends to be grayer, especially on the flanks. It has some white flecking. It tends to have a different amount of black on the back of the neck. But the biggest difference here, aside from the face pattern, is the bill color and the shape. Clark's grebe tends to have a slimmer, more dagger-like bill than even the Western grebe. And the Western grebe has kind of a dull greenish with black culmen and a lot of dark on it bill, whereas Clark's grebe has this bright orangey yellow bill, like pretty much all the time.
In Mexican Spanish, the name translates to yellow-billed grebe, actually.
Yeah.
So.
And then I included a red-throated loon in there in juvenile plumage because really that is the bird that most commonly is kind of confused with the Western grebes.
It was 40 years ago when they split those grebes. God.
Yeah.
You're right, of course. Yeah.
And the possibility for a red-throated grebe in Southern California in summer, probably not going to happen. But like some ducks, loons will summer over when they're in their first year, and
we get them off the coast of off the coast of North Carolina, off the southeast coast. You get those lingering non-breeding birds that just kind of hang out, spend the whole summer on the ocean.
But you can see, that the bill shape, the overall pattern is basically the same. It's got a white throat. It's got a long neck. It's dark gray on the back. It's got kind of a slim dagger-like bill. But that's where it ends. The loon is just a much stockier, heavier, thicker, shorter-necked bird.
Yep, for sure. Western grebe seems pretty obvious for that one. Nice bird. Like those things. Fantastic breeding display.
So,
in their range.
Yeah, I think that's it for birds here. And I would like to invite ABA members to come join us at ABA Community. You can see the URL there. It's our own ABA social media experience where you have we have groups like What's This Bird, and you can meet other ABA members there. And it's a wonderful place to check out what's happening in the ABA, because we have all of our content updated there. Sorry,
Good
my
reason
dog
to
who
join.
is not my dog who is not feeling well is really distracting me, because I think she's about to have an accident behind me.
Oh yeah. Well, we won't keep you too long, Greg. Even though we're about 10 minutes out, I watch the end of this amazing soccer game. So
we are gonna have to cut this one off. I think pretty much now, because she's not happy
Greg's got to
at
run to the
all.
backyard.
She's been not feeling well, and she just will not. Anybody who lives with a border collie, once they want something, it's all over. Your life, you have to do what they say. So, this one's being cut short about 6-7 minutes by my dog Sammy, who is right there. Come here. You want to say hi before? Oh,
We'll give you some
she's
extra birding content down the road.
She's going for the back door, folks. So thank you all.
Join the ABA.
Join the ABA. Join the ABA. And she is. Yeah, I've got to kill this. So thank you all. And
bye, everybody.
we will
Thank
see you
you
in a couple of